They are back, but they are shrinking in numbers. Who are you talking about, Glenn? Quinnen Williams, the doubters, the haters, the people who trashed the guy early on in his career are back again after Williams had a slow start to this season. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web. Apologize in advance if we have any sound issues. If you've been following the show, you know that this mic right here has been giving me problems lately. I went to the headset mic. I hate the way that damn thing sounds. This sounds so much better. So I made sure the connections were clean. We'll see how it goes. If we got to switch it up, we'll switch it up. Quinnen Williams, Jets defensive tackle. And listen, excuse me, listen. I have said myself a couple of times this year, Quinnen's got to play better. Quinnen's making a lot of money to not be productive. However, what I've not been saying, but what a lot of Jets fans have been saying, Quinnen's overpaid. Quinnen got the bag, and now he's mailing it in. Quinnen sucks. Listen, even as I was saying he's got to be more productive, I was bringing up the fact that he's got to be able to beat some double teams. I'm not saying he's got to, blow up every double team and go screaming into the backfield and wreck game plans. That's not realistic. But as of a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, Quinnen Williams. Now keep this in mind, and this is where the sort of the egomaniac in the fan who believes that listen, Glenn, I looked at the box score, there weren't numbers there, so I know Quinnen wasn't good. I know Quinnen's been bad this year, but if you look at the way opposing offenses are facing Quinnen Williams, you see that through the first 5-6 weeks of the season. I believe he was third or fourth in the NFL, certainly top 5 in percentage of plays on which opposing offenses double-teamed him. And again, that's not to say it's an excuse, because when you're making what Quinnen makes, you got to beat some of those double teams. But to say this player sucks, but opposing coordinators are consistently more than most players in the entire NFL using 2 guys to block him. Like that there tells you coordinators are watching him on film and saying, damn it, this guy's a problem. How are we going to slow him down? All right, let's use 2 blockers. And it worked. Listen, the numbers weren't there. The numbers were not very good. Quinnen Williams, however, for those of you who hadn't noticed, and there are people who haven't noticed, because I've had this conversation with people. Now, some people are getting quiet about it. Some of the Quinnen Williams haters are piping down a little bit, but there are still those who are like, so he had 1 good week. Oh, so he's been good for 2 weeks since Hassan Reddick got here. Not the case at all, folks. Not the case at all. Quinnen Williams, real quick. Weeks 1 through 5, the time frame where I was saying it was justified in saying, where's Quinnen? He's got to be better. Not saying Quinnen sucks, just wondering what the problem is. Weeks 1 through 5, Quinnen Williams had 11 quarterback pressures. That's just not good enough. For a guy of his stature, for a guy of his talent level, for a guy making as much money as he is. Quinnen Williams, weeks 1 through 5, 11 quarterback pressures. Weeks 6 through 9, one game less, right? The first sample size is 5 games, second sample size 4 games. In his last 4 games, Quinnen Williams, 21 pressures. So he's doubled his pressures over the past 4 weeks from what he did in the first 5 weeks. He's logged, I believe, 3 sacks, a handful of TFLs, a couple of TFLs, and I noticed it. I believe it was during the Pittsburgh game when I first commented, and I was watching, early on in that game, and I was like, this might be the best Quinnen's looked this year. Again, not lighting up the box score, because DTs rarely do that. Even when you have a great game as a DT, you could take a bunch of goose eggs in the box score. Oh, he didn't have any sacks. Oh, he didn't have any forced fumbles. Oh, he didn't have any TFLs. You can disrupt games from his position without logging things in the box score. This is what I say all the time. Fantasy football, Madden football has ruined the perspective of fans. If they don't see things on paper that would result in big points in fantasy, the guy must not be good. Couldn't be further from the truth. So Quinnen Williams, over his last 4 games, much better player, playing like the guy you expected him to be. And now with Hassan Reddick on board, and these last 2 weeks, now his best game, well, in terms of sheer pressures, being disruptive, I believe the Buffalo game, I'm going to pull that up real quick, was his best. 8 pressures in that one. Let's see. I'm going to pull this real quick. That was this past week against Houston, 8 pressures total. But against Buffalo, he had 5. He had 3 more against Pittsburgh with a QB hit. Thought he had a sack in that game. He didn't. But he did have a couple of sacks in the New England game. He had a couple sacks this week. And he had one against Buffalo. Total of 14 hurries, 21 total pressures. This all according to PFF. And you can rip PFF for their grades. I get that. I do it too sometimes. But just basically, basic stats like a QB hit. Like, that's not a grade. That's not an opinion. Did you get to the quarterback and hit him before he threw the ball without getting a flag? That's not, I'm not going to, PFF can't do that. Anyone can do that. PFF just happens to do it. So while their grades are out of whack sometimes, there is some data they pass along that they log, that they provide that has some value. If you're a fan trying to look up and see exactly what a guy is doing. So like I said, just without referencing PFF, just watching him against Pittsburgh, I felt like this looks more like Quinnen Williams. Let's keep an eye on him in the next couple weeks and see if he keeps this up. He has kept it up. So Williams seems to have turned the corner. The haters, the doubters, like I said, 2024, folks, people don't admit they're wrong anymore. People don't say, "Oh, I screwed up. My bad. My miss." No one does that. It's just excuses. Oh, well, he's only better. He's been better for a week. He's only better because of Hassan Reddick. No, not the case at all. Was again, box score wasn't phenomenal, or the line, his line on the year last year wasn't great. On film, he was absolutely dominant. That's why you saw the double teams last year as well. Teams, the offensive coordinators don't spend time thinking of ways to waste extra blockers. If Quinnen Williams was the player that his critics claim he is, he would never see a double team. But he sees them more than 99% of the defensive linemen in the NFL. Quinnen Williams sees double team. So good for Quinnen to finally turn it around. And such a hard guy. Aside from the production, aside from what he's done on the field since becoming a Jet, I can't believe the number of people that how quickly they turn on him. Same with Sauce, right? We're seeing it now with Sauce Gardner, who is struggling. There are no two ways about it. Sauce Gardner playing the worst football of his career thus far. But again, there have been times this season where Sauce will give up a catch, maybe a couple of catches, and you hear he's terrible, he sucks, and he can't cover anyone. And then you look back at the previous weeks, it's like, oh, no, nobody's targeted him in 2-3 weeks. And you think that's what NFL coordinators are doing? You think offensive coordinators and quarterbacks and receivers are sitting down and watching film and going, that dude sucks, but let's not throw it his way? Like, we got spoiled with Sauce. Right now, Sauce Gardner is a victim of his own success, right? All-pro, first 2 years, unheard of, not a thing that happens in real life, hasn't happened in a million years, won't happen for another million years. So Sauce sets this sort of unattainable standard, or not even unattainable, but unsustainable would be the more accurate way to say it. He's not going to be an all-pro every year. There are going to be some seasons where he gives up some catches. This has been one of those seasons, but the speed at which the fans turned on Sauce Gardner, and I see it. He sucks. He's overrated. Trade him. Get rid of Sauce. It's sheer insanity. It really is. But he does have a big challenge this week, and this will be an opportunity. This is a game. Listen, the Jets need to win all their games. There's no like, oh, they can lose a couple more. There is a world where they can maybe lose one more game and sneak into the playoffs, but they have to treat it as if they can't lose another game. And that's why I have a hard time seeing them making the playoffs, because of the fact that they've been so dysfunctional up to this point. And again, keep in mind, I'm the guy that said they would win 14 games this year. I'm not going to run from that. I will not back down from the amount of talent this roster has. I don't care. You can do the record. Your record is what you are, what your record says you are. Great. But your record doesn't always reflect your talent. Sometimes poor coaching impacts that. I used the example a couple of weeks ago. Look no further than Bill Parcells taking over from Rich Kotite with essentially identical rosters. Couple little changes, some changes on defense because Parcells went to a 3-4 from a 4-3. Offensively, almost identical rosters. I think it was 10 of 11 starters were the same. And the Jets went from 1-15 to 9-8 in 1 year because of coaching. Coaching matters. Talent's great, got to have it. Without coaching, doesn't matter. So I'm not going to sit here and say that the Jets don't have enough talent. I've been banging the drum this entire offseason. This team has a ton of talent, and they do. but they've been so dysfunctional, and it's taken them so long to have essentially what was a good half of football. This past week against Houston, the first half was embarrassing. It was absolutely, it was atrocious. There's no getting around that. But then the second half, they came out, played their best half of the year. And now Sauce Gardner and company. Now you got the Arizona Cardinals up next. And you got Marvin Harrison Jr. across from you, who to me was the best player in this draft. I've said a million, people still give me a hard time. Oh, you wanted Brock Bowers. Marvin Harrison was the only guy in this class I said I would have taken over Bowers. That's how good Harrison was. I think he's got future Hall of Famer, written all over him, just from a skill standpoint, a pedigree standpoint. Look at what his dad did, and he is much bigger, much stronger, and has tons of speed. So Marvin Harrison Jr., absolute nightmare for any corner to have to contend with. Sauce Gardner, who has been struggling, he's got 10 days, right? The mini bye, you got an extra 3 days to prep, whatever, day off, rest day, however many days he has, 8 days, 9 days to get ready for Marvin Harrison Jr. If he goes out there and has a strong game against Harrison, and listen, if I'm Arizona, I'm going to see what DJ Reed can do against the guy Marvin Harrison size. Because we know the Jets don't let their corners travel, so it's not as if Sauce is going to be covering him the whole time. And look, if Sauce plays the way he has been of late, you're not even going to want that. But right now, Sauce Gardner is going into a pretty damn close to what you'd call a must-win game. And he's going to be going against the best young receiver in the NFL in Marvin Harrison Jr. So that one, it's going to be something to keep an eye on. Sauce, again, the down year, I get it. But the biggest factor to me, it's not just about the Jets' ability to slow down Marvin Harrison Jr. We'll get into this more later in the week. But the first thing that popped into my head when the Jets pull off that win and you look ahead at who's the next opponent, Kyler Murray. And my first thought is I just have visions of Drake May and Jacoby Brissett and C.J. Stroud. And now listen, C.J. Stroud, there was more meat on the bone. He stayed in the pocket and threw in situations where there was room for him to run. But Jacoby Brissett ate them up on the ground. Drake May was eating them up on the ground. Kyler Murray likes to run, and he's that quick. He's got the quickness to speed. If he decides to just run every time it's there, and the Jets don't clean that up, you're going to be looking at Kyler Murray having a 100-yard day on the ground, and just being able to chew up clock, eat up clock, and prevent the Jets from getting the football back. So again, with the another mini bye, Jeff Ulbrich and his staff have to come up with a way to slow Murray down. Now, what they're going to need is for the corners to cover. So that's where Sauce and Reed come in. And then, and of course, Michael Carter in the slot, if he's good to go. I know he had a back injury the other day. But if you're looking at that secondary and you're looking at a way to slow Murray down on the ground, the secondary's got to do their job. And then it's got to be Jamie and Sherwood. It's got to be Quincy Williams, those linebackers in the middle of the field, who are going to have to keep tabs on him. You got to spy him. You have to do more than what you've been doing, because the Jets have been failing to contain while not spying and just having quarterbacks rip off big runs left and right. And that's going to be a challenge for the Jets this week. On offense, the Jets have to show that they can keep doing what they did in the second half. Again, it's one half of football. So it's one thing to get overexcited about one good game. The Jets had a good half of offensive football. And I see people saying, oh, it was still sloppy. It was still ugly. They still had penalties. Listen, folks, no team is going to never make a penalty. Okay? No team is going to just have a 5 or 6 game run with no flags. Sorry, had a little technical issue there. I think X isn't streaming or something like that. But you're not going to play. It's not realistic to just say, well, they have to have an offensive game where they score 21 points and a half. Aaron Rodgers throws 3 touchdowns, and they can't have a mistake. Let's be real here. The Jets had 3 drives of 70 yards or more. I saw that from Rich Cimini the other day. 3 touchdown drives of 70 yards or more in the second half. And I think 2018, something like that, against the Browns was the last time that happened for this team. So last week was the best half of offensive football we've seen from this team in years. So get excited about it, yeah, but also be reserved about it. I see people saying, "Oh, well, it doesn't." They needed Garrett Wilson to make miraculous catches. Well, that's why you have Garrett Wilson. Jets fans must be the only fans that say stuff like the quarterback only did good because the other guy played well. Yeah, that's the plan. When you sign these guys, when you sign a guy, trade for a guy, draft a guy, the plan is he plays well. So when he plays well, I don't know why there are people looking for reasons to sort of to knock it and say, "Oh, it's a big deal. So what? He needed Garrett." You know what? If Malachi Corley holds on to the football, then you don't need two great catches from Garrett. You got them, but you wouldn't have needed them. So some weird takes. Fans, and listen, Jets fans are an angry, frustrated bunch. I get it. I'm as angry as the next fan. I'm as fed up with this team as the next fan. But to get to the point where the team does something well, and you're like, how can I, not give them credit? How can I find a way to take away what they did? And it's the other. I've seen a few people say that about Quinnen Williams, right? Oh, so what? He had one good game against a backup guard. No, he had a dominant game against the backup guard, and he had 3 really good games in the weeks leading up to that game. So why not just what's the problem with saying, you know what? I was wrong about that guy. He's not mailing it in ever since getting a paycheck. He is playing hard, and now he is getting results. I'm glad I was wrong. That would be the appropriate response. Not, one good week. Backup guard. Blah, blah, blah. I've seen it on Twitter. I've seen it on the forums of Jet Nation. And these are probably the same people who hated Williams as a rookie. Literally year 1, I saw people calling Quinnen Williams a bust. He's got to go. I'm watching him. What was it? It was early in the year, week 3, week 4, week 5, something like that of Quinnen Williams' rookie year. Go back and watch him against Dallas and what he was doing. Watch him against Miami that year. I think the second game later in the year. And you could see it. It's like, all right, this guy doesn't have huge numbers as a rookie, but he is putting some reps on film that show you he has the ability to absolutely dominate. So at that point, it just comes down to how hard is he going to work? When you're watching a rookie, you don't know how much work they're going to put in after they get paid. So it's like, you can show flashes, but can you do it consistently? And Quinnen Williams took him a couple years to get there, but he put in the work, the consistency came, and he was phenomenal last year. And he'd been paid by then. Oh, but Glenn, he only had 5 minutes. You know what really hurt Quinnen Williams' sack production last year? And I mentioned this at the time. There is not an infinite number of sacks for a defense to get. It's not as if there are 10,000 opportunities to get sacks. Quarterbacks drop back and throw the ball only so many times a game. So what happened last year that didn't happen the year before? Quinnen had big sack numbers the year before. What didn't happen that year that Quinnen had big numbers that did happen the year he saw his numbers dip? Bryce Huff and Jermaine Johnson racked up a bunch of sacks. So a bunch of plays where maybe Quinnen gets there, the speed guys off the edge were getting there quicker. Because Quinnen, watch him on film, he was still dominant. Quinnen Williams was phenomenal last year. He was one of the reasons why JJ and Bryce Huff were getting to the quarterback. So, again, you look at the box score, it tells you one thing. You look at reality, you look at the film, it was another. So, yes, after a very good season last year, Quinnen Williams had a slow start to this season, and now he's dominating. Rich, how we doing, buddy? Says O-line was much better against a good defense. Running game was good as well. Listen, the running game, there are some numbers. If you look at this team, we're all bogged down because they've lost games to teams they shouldn't lose games to. There's so much disappointment in where this team is versus where they could feasibly be. We're not talking about, if they would have caught 3 or 4 breaks in this game and another 5 breaks in that game. No, we're talking if the kicker hits some kicks. We're talking if Robert Saleh works to get them in field goal range against Denver versus trying a 50-yarder, like tiny little things that this team could be 6-3 easily. So it's not, it's not so crazy to sit there and say this team should have a much better, this team could easily have a much better record than they do, but they don't. It is what it is. But over the last 4 weeks, some really good things have been happening for the Jets on offense that I don't know if people realize it. Again, because of how pissed off they are about the results and about the record, and I get that. But Breece Hall in the last 4 weeks has averaged at least 4.9 yards a carry 3 out of those 4 weeks. There were games before that where he's at 1.2 a carry, 2.1 a carry, whatever, where he was getting completely shut down, couldn't run at all. And now in the last 4 weeks, Breece Hall has averaged 4.9 a carry or bet. That's his worst. No, I take that back. There was Pittsburgh, I think 3-4, whatever it was. But of the and Pittsburgh, listen, damn good defense on the road. You don't expect someone to go in there and average 4.9, 5.5 a carry. But again, Breece Hall over his last 4 games, 3 times he's averaged 4.9 a carry or better. Garrett Wilson has been phenomenal. I mean, we saw what he did last week against Houston, and everyone talked about the effect that adding Davante Adams would have on him. But let's not take away the fact that Garrett Wilson had 100 against Minnesota. He had 100 against Buffalo. Then he had the down game against Pittsburgh. Again, the damn good defense. What are you going to do? And then you play New England. He goes 5 for 113. And then this last week, he goes 9 for 90 with 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson is producing at a much higher level than he had been previously, just as Breece Hall is. And this predates Davante Adams' arrival. So just like people are trying to take credit away from Quinnen Williams improving because of Hassan Reddick's arrival, Garrett Wilson was starting to elevate his game before Davante Adams arrived. So it's not as if it's only because of Davante. Davante helps you. You damn right it does. That's the goal. That's why you add good players. But between Breece and then look at the sack numbers. Look at the Aaron Rodgers sack numbers over the past few weeks. And I've mentioned this. I've mentioned this on the forums on Jet Nation. I'm going to check I want to make sure I get this one right because let's see. I want to say he got sacked twice this week. Once the week before, once the week before that, and 3 times the week before that. We're going to double check it though and make sure I'm not out of my mind here. But the Jets' ability to keep Aaron Rodgers upright and protect him has been incredibly, or it's been much improved in recent weeks. So here's the Rodgers numbers in terms of sacks. So Houston got him twice last week. The Patriots got him once. The Steelers got him once. The Bills got him 3 times. And really, I'm not going to pull those numbers up right now. Maybe I'll be able to real quick. It's not as if, even bigger than the sacks is the pressures. We've seen the pressures drop a fair bit. And that's obviously, giving Rodgers more time to sit back there and make throws. I don't see how you can look at this offensive line the way they're playing right now and say they haven't improved dramatically. Breece is running it better. Rodgers is getting hit less. He's getting sacked less. And as a byproduct of that, or as a result of, or that plus bringing in Davante, you're seeing these huge games from Garrett Wilson. I said it after the game. It's frustrating. They are now doing the things we hoped they would be able to do when the season started. And listen, there are factors, there are reasons why the Jets are where they are right now. It's not really and yes, Rich said some of those recovered sacks and some of the sacks Rodgers has taken have been on Rodgers. He's had some plays where he's held onto the ball too long. I'm sure he's acknowledged as much. So it hasn't all been on the offensive line. So you look at a Jets offensive line that has been protecting the quarterback better for the past 4 weeks. An offensive line that has done a better job of opening running lanes for the running backs. And don't forget, I got to dig up these numbers and take a look. I mean, just from watching, just eyeball test, we're seeing a lot more stuff, a lot more stretch, outside zone, outside toss stuff to Breece Hall, getting him outside. Listen, he has the ability, the speed, the burst to get to the corner and make plays. And we're seeing him do that a lot. Under Nate Hackett, it was pounded up the middle, pounded up the middle, pounded up the middle, and it wasn't working. And, one thing we're seeing right now is a lot less 12 personnel. We're seeing a lot more 11 because the frustrating thing, one of the many frustrating things about Nate Hackett is, as with any coach, and Mike Westhoff writes about this in his book, right? Mike Westhoff talks about how coaches get so caught up in the X's and O's that they forget who the X and who the O is. This is my scheme, this is what I want to run, this is this play. Versus saying, okay, when you run that play, who's going to be trying to make the play on your side of the ball, and who's he going against on the other side of the ball? And when teams are better than you at certain spots, as we've seen with the Jets this year when they've tried to just run the ball up the middle when Nate Hackett was the OC over and over again. And it's not, you can't even say, and you see it now on Twitter. It's still happening, tweeting out videos and clips of offensive linemen like triple teaming one dude, or some of the blocking schemes that just don't make sense. And that's not down to talent. That's down to preparation, which the coaches are responsible for. So now that we've got Downing calling the plays, the Jets are running more, like I said, they're running fewer 2 tight end personnel packages because, again, when you're drawing up your plays, your X's and O's, if your tight ends can't block, you shouldn't be saying, well, this is what we run, which is what Nate Hackett was doing. This is what we do. This is what we like. And, of course, I'm sure Aaron Rodgers had some input, a ton of input. But Todd Downing came along and said, our tight ends can't block. So we're going to stop running behind tight ends that can't block. Look, maybe they make a move, maybe they add a tight end, something like that. But we're seeing less of it. Saw Jeremy Ruckert lined up at fullback a couple times, which I've been calling for 2 years. They've lined them up there once or twice, and he absolutely dominates, and then they move him back to tight end, where he's not as effective. So it looks like Todd Downing has taken some inventory and said, okay, who do we have? What do they do well? And let's build an offense based on that. So you have some offensive linemen that move well. Tyron Smith, I thought this past week, and really before looking at the pass blocking aspect of it, I thought getting outside to the edge and being a lead blocker or opening up lanes outside for Breece Hall, I feel like this is one of his better games. And PFF grades him out 89, highest grade of the year by a million miles. Now, again, I haven't watched the All-22 yet. Hoping to do that tonight. But the bottom line here is that this Jets, a lot of the things that fans have been critical of the Jets for, the O-line can't keep Rodgers clean. The O-line can't open up any running lanes. They have been in recent weeks. And hopefully Keith Carter can get to the point where he doesn't have 3 dudes blocking one guy. And Keith Carter can get it cleaned up. And let's give this past week, who does the credit go to? Honestly, it's I'm on the one hand, I'm like, give Keith Carter credit. Fashanu stepped in right guard and Max Mitchell at left guard, and they both played really well. And then they come out and they're like, I haven't practiced there. So not like Keith Carter's been coaching them up. All right, Max, we're going to work you a guard today. Olu, you too. Here's what you need to know. Here's what you have to look for. There's been none of that. These guys, it was an emergency situation. The Jets were down some guards. AVT out. Xavier Newman out. Jake Hansen gets hurt. Your top 3 guards, top 3 right guards are gone. You had Alec Lindstrom on the bench, who I don't believe has played a pro rep. And I liked him coming out of college, but obviously as a pro, he hasn't worked out. Hasn't had an opportunity to. I mean, he's done something to impress the Jets because they just added him a couple weeks ago. And a lot of time, you keep an eye on practice squads. That's like it's a revolving door. Guys come in. Sometimes the guy's there for 8 days and then he's gone. They get a quick look at him and he goes. So Lindstrom not only stuck with the practice squad, was elevated to the active roster ahead of last week's game. But however, and fair enough on the Jets, they didn't feel completely comfortable playing him. So they went with Fashanu and Mitchell first. God forbid if one of them had been hurt, then we probably see Lindstrom. Tony Do GM, same old Jets, nothing wrong with Q. He lost the entire D-line he was playing with. He did. He lost some, the Jets, they let JFM go. Al Woods left. Quentin Jefferson left. So there were a lot of guys that who are no longer there. And you've got some, Solomon Thomas, solid enough vet, but not a difference maker. Leonard Taylor, a guy who has done some really good things as a rookie. So you're looking forward to see what he brings in the future. But yeah, the D-line, there have been times this year where the Jets are lining up on defense and, getting aligned on the D-line. And I look and I'm like, and I think I've talked about this. There were some plays last week, and I'm sure it's happened a few times this year, where it's Quinnen Williams and the 3 undrafted linemen, McGregor, Watts, and Taylor. And it's like, wow, this is a team. We used to complain they had too many first rounders on that defense. Well, that's not a problem anymore. With Jermaine Johnson down. And again, I get that Solomon Thomas is a first rounder, but he's, he hasn't played to that level. Let's see. Yes, because he's playing much better, but the Jets fans are sensitive. I think part of it too, and I can't blame people. This team's been so bad for so long. And as I said, the disappointment this year, we're angry, we're frustrated. I'm sure there are people who have the game on TV, but they're like, they wait till they hear the broadcaster scream about something and then look, what happened? Who made a play? Did the Jets score? Not a lot of people are sitting there intently watching every play to see who's making a difference. Because if you're doing that, you see that Quinnen Williams has been a difference maker over the past 4 weeks. And I don't blame people who can't watch this team. Believe me, I have my days where I just sit there and shake my head and like, I can't believe I'm taking the time to watch this football team right now. But you do it, and that is what it is. That wraps up everything I wanted to cover today. Wanted to talk about, give Quinnen Williams his props. Talk about the fact the Jets have to figure out a way to slow down running quarterbacks, especially this week in Kyler Murray. It's been a problem. It can't continue to be a problem. Sauce Gardner's coverage has been a problem. It can't continue to be a problem. Not this week, not against Marvin Harrison Jr., or he will absolutely light him up. Big challenge for him coming up. And let's see. Rich says he's going to enjoy the winning streak. Listen, I said the other day, Rich, before that Pittsburgh game, I said the Jets were good enough to run the table. But really, in my mind, I was thinking you probably lose to Pittsburgh, but then run the table. Like you have enough talent to do that if you get your act together. Losing to the Patriots, I was done. I was like, that's it. You can't lose to a far inferior team. You're not a little bit better than the Patriots. You are way better than the Patriots from a pure talent perspective. And you found a way to lose that game. And then after the first half this week, it was like, all right, this team might be picking in the damn top 5 again. Because it doesn't matter if you have all the talent in the world if you can't put it together. And that's where the Jets have been for most of this year. A very, very talented team that can put it together. Unique says Sauce needs to be better. He's grabbing way too much. There's a little grabbing going on. I don't, this has been a criticism of Sauce his first 2 years, where people will find plays where he puts a hand on a receiver. But really the rule, the NFL rule states that if contact is made, it's pass interference. If you significantly, that's the big part of that rule. If you significantly impact the receiver running his route. So a little tap, a little touch, a little, grab the shoulder, that stuff they'll let slide. But this year, Sauce has been a little more grabby and a little more aggressive. So listen, it's not like he's an old guy. So did he put in the same work this offseason that he's put in previous years? What's the issue? Why the slip? Why the drop off? Because there has been an undeniable drop off. Michael Fox says, am I the only one that sees we need a solid run stuffer? No, the Jets need help up front. I don't know if they're in position to make any trades. I said the other day, the guy I mentioned a few minutes ago who they let go, Quentin Jefferson, the Cleveland Browns have been having him inactive riding the bench for the past 3 or 4 weeks. If I'm Joe Douglas and if Joe Douglas is still in charge, I don't know if Joe Douglas is allowed to make any trades or if Woody has to make all the transactions at this point. But I'd call the Browns and say, look, how about a 6th rounder in 2026 for a guy who you're not even playing on a team that isn't going anywhere in the Browns, and see if they'll give him up. I'm not giving up a 4 or whatever for Jefferson, but I'll give you a day 3 pick to help that run defense in the middle. But I will say though, Micro Fox, I'm glad you mentioned it because this is a topic I just put up there on the forums at Jet Nation. And I get that the numbers against the run for the Jets aren't bad. They do need to get better. I'm not denying that for 1 second. But if you look at their last 3 games, and I'm not talking about quarterback runs, I'm talking design runs, feature backs, the guys who are getting the bulk of the carries, Ramondre Stevenson, Mixon, Najee Harris, the guys who they've faced most recently. What was the number that I pulled up? I looked at every single run. 31 of the 51 carries that those 3 running backs have had against the Jets in the past 3 weeks have gone for 3 yards or less. But, I mean, they're just not as consistent. Michael Fox, I see you saying Al Woods is available. He is, but I wonder at his age and weight and the injury he's coming off of if they think it's prohibitive. But at the very least, bring him in, right? Because Al Woods, honestly, I'd forgotten about the injury. And when the Jets struggled the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year, I was like, man, where's Al Woods? Isn't he a free agent? And I look him up and it's like, oh, he's still rehabbing from, the ACL or whatever he had last year. So it was like Al Woods was a free agent, but he wasn't able to play. That was like a month and a bit ago. If he's ready to roll now, absolutely, you give him a call. Let's see. Jets are 4 games behind 2 wild card teams with 8 games left. Yeah, and they, again, they just got to win their football games. That's all it comes down to. Unique says he thinks the offense is pressing too much, and they can't see. Again, the run stuff, I'm not sitting here saying they're great against the run. What I'm saying is they're not as bad as we've been, and I'm guilty of it too. I've been saying they can't stop the run, but really, well over half the carries they've faced over the past 3 weeks, they're holding running backs to 3 yards per carry or less. Again, that's about what 65% of the time. They've given up some chunk plays. They gave up one for 18, one for 29, another one for 34. There's a couple 10s. I think there's a 10 and an 11, 2 10s and an 11. But again, to me, a team, if we're going to talk about a team not being able to stop the run, that's a team that is consistently giving up 5, 6, 7 yards per carry, with the occasional stop, but just where teams are able to bleed the clock dry because you can't get off the field because they're going 5 yards, 4 yards, 3 yards, 6 yards, 5 yards, 7 yards. That's getting run all over. 0, 2, 2, 3, you're giving up 3 yards or less per carry 65% of the time. You're doing something right some of the time. You can stop the run a little bit. They need to get better, yes. But this narrative of like the Jets have no shot because they cannot stop the run at all. Audition said it a couple minutes ago. I would imagine Jefferson would be available. He's on a team that isn't going anywhere, and he's not playing, and he's old. I doubt the Cleveland Browns are sitting there saying we cannot give this guy up. He's an older veteran on a team that isn't going to the playoffs. Although I'll tell you what, Jameis Winston, he fires it up like he did last week against Baltimore. Cleveland's got a good team, man. Cleveland, oddly enough, was held back by their $285 trillion quarterback. Tony says, unfortunately, JD dismantled the DL. Well, he didn't. He didn't. One thing Aaron Rodgers said at the end of his presser the other day, and it kind of jumped out at me during the game because I don't think I think he was flat out bad the first 5 or 6 weeks. But I feel like Javon Kinlaw is coming around a little bit, and that's a big addition, literally and figuratively, a 330-pound DT. Feel like he's been better in recent weeks, and Rodgers sort of randomly was like, hey, I got to shout out a guy who's been tearing it up, doing a really nice job, Javon Kinlaw. He had some plays this week where his explosion off the ball and penetration was phenomenal. Like first guy out of his stance, first guy through the line, disrupting the run. So Kinlaw has been better in recent weeks, not great, but if he is getting more comfortable in the system, that would be huge. But at the same time, one of the knocks on Kinlaw, actually I have a really good friend of mine who's a huge Niner fan. The first thing he told me when the Jets signed Kinlaw, he's like, dude, he's going to look like Superman at times, and then he's going to disappear for stretches. And he disappeared earlier in the year, was largely invisible, and now the past couple weeks he's had some Superman moments. So we'll see where that goes from here. But yeah, JD let some guys go, but I think he expected Kinlaw to be able to step in and make plays. That hasn't worked out. Fotu, I was skeptical on the Fotu signing. I was trying to be optimistic because he didn't play a ton of snaps in Arizona. Really, Fotu and Kinlaw, I looked at the same way. I just looked at it and said, this defensive coaching staff has done such a good job of developing guys and getting the best out of them that maybe what they've done at their previous stops won't matter because they'll get better. And again, Kinlaw improving. Fotu went from injured to completely ineffective to back to injured. He's back on IR. So, I mean, you didn't bring Al Woods back. You had the injury. You didn't bring Jefferson back. He had, he's an older guy. You opted for Kinlaw instead. They just haven't worked out. But if you can go get Jefferson for a day 3 pick, then I would absolutely do it. And adding Hassan helps. Adding Hassan is big for everyone. But Hassan's got to contain, right? We saw, for those of you who missed it, Hassan had a little Twitter beef. Well, not a Twitter beef, but he took to Twitter to criticize former Patriots coach Bill Belichick because Belichick went on McAfee and was like, in his very mumbly way, was basically like, Patriots quarterbacks, Reddick didn't contain, every single one of their big runs were to the, over the right guard, which I think Reddick was on most of those runs, it was on that side. There was a big one late in that game, that final drive, where he just looped way too far outside, way past Jacoby Brissett, and Brissett picked up a big first down. So Hassan Reddick was an absolute liability against the run in that first game. Not as bad this week, but again, like I said, there were some opportunities for Stroud that he didn't take. But that'll wrap this one up. Thanks for hopping on, folks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for chatting. Listen, the Jets, they got a big win this past week. They played well. They played well enough that we should be excited. Not like it was a sloppy 12-9 win against a garbage team. And I get, look, the Texans had some injuries. I was probably had too much praise for Houston after that game, saying how the Jets had beaten a really good opponent. But of course, I completely brain fart on the Stephon Diggs being out. Hadn't forgotten Nico Collins because he's been out for a little bit, but Diggs just a couple of days earlier was announced as being out for the season. So the Texans didn't have a lot to work with. So the Jets caught some breaks there, but even still, not a bad football team. Rich, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Audition, Unique, all you guys, Tony, thanks so much for tuning in. Like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. Comment in the comment section if you like something I said. If you hate something I said, tell me. Thick skin, folks. Tell me I'm an idiot. Tell me you love it. Whatever. Don't care. Have a good one, Jets fans.